And hello everybody, and welcome to another interview with us here at Facilitate Exchange. Today, we're going to be talking about manufacturing execution systems and their role in delivering scalable cell and gene therapy products. I'm really delighted to be joined by Welf Ludwig, who is the sales and marketing lead at Körber. How are you doing, Welf?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, not bad, thank you. Not bad. Why don't you tell me a little bit about Körber and sort of your history and the expertise of the company?
Sure. And yeah, first off, also thank you very much for having us here today. Really looking forward to the conversation. So a little bit about Körber. So we're an international technology group with about 10,000 employees. More than 100 locations worldwide. And our goal is really to turn entrepreneurial thinking into customer success, and in the end also shape technological change. At Körber, we offer a unique portfolio of integrated solutions. So this means, consulting, inspection machines, packaging materials, and also software. And I'm personally representing our software business unit today. And we help, pharmaceutical, biotech, cell and gene companies unlock the potential to their business. We've been doing this over, hundreds of years. Over the last 100 years. So we really also understand, the processes, the regulations our customers face every day. And, we're really delivering the difference along the pharma, value chain with our different solutions. And, today, really, I'm here to talk about, our software product, Verum PassX, which is considered one of the leading MES or manufacturing execution systems for the pharmaceutical and biotech space, providing things like electronic batch recording, data analytics solution, and also like artificial intelligence to accelerate things like product commercialization and uncover your business value essentially.
Nice. So I just want to take a step back a little bit. Like the term manufacturing execution system and MES. For those that don't know, can you just maybe explain what that is? What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, sure. So MES, stands for manufacturing execution systems. And somebody from the outside looking in, that can sound like, oh, that's like a big term. What does that mean, right? And often also it has some negative connotations. Kind of like ERP. It's like this big, heavy system, right? And that's really not the case with modern manufacturing execution systems. It's really what an MES entails, right? If you look at kind of your facility, that could be, a cell therapy facility, it could be a lab, could be, big pharma, vaccine production. If you look at the shop floor, right, there's tasks that people do, right? Operators, they're performing the process of the certain production steps to produce these life-saving medicines. What an MES does, it helps that person, it guides them through the process, through, an operator would have like a tablet, for example, or a PC, and there's going to be instructions on there, right, that tell them how to produce that batch. And there's a number of benefits. Traditionally, operators would be using paper-based processes or, spreadsheets or Word documents. And with all those type of things, one, it doesn't scale, and two, it also leads to errors, right? So MES, along with that, not just the instructions, there's a lot of other, things which we can talk about as we go through our interview here, like connecting with your shop floor systems, connecting with your LIMS, connecting with ERP, right? All those different systems to essentially drive the production. And, some of the benefits, that you get out of an MES, right, is things like right first time, right? So if you look at, a typical legacy process, right? If you have a paper-based batch record where an operator needs to manually record or perform calculations, right? In cell therapy, we see there's a lot of calculations involved. And, if you walk on kind of one of, let's call it like a legacy shop floor, right? So you see people with calculators, with pens, recording, performing calculations. That's error prone, right? Because somebody can just fat finger or type in the wrong value, record something, right? And mistakes can be made. So an MES when you digitize, we can automatically perform those type of calculations. We can prove or check things as they're being recorded, right? So for example, if you're recording maybe pH value or cell density, right, we will check, does that value fall within the range? And if it does, you're allowed to proceed, right? So we call that right first time. Review by exception is another kind of phrase or benefit we talk about a lot. So what that means, right, is, and I think this is really one of the big benefits also in cell therapy or cell and gene personalized medicine, right? Because when you look at, let's talk about, an autologous process, right? It's really that vein to vein, right? One patient is one batch. And if you think about it, that process, like, you have a lot more patient, a lot more batches all the time, right? And if you were to do that with kind of like a paper-based approach, that means you have to hire a lot of quality people to review those batches, those pieces of paper. That can take a lot of time, and our patients in this space, they don't have a lot of that time. So if you implement an electronic solution, you can actually do something called review by exception, where the system, and this goes back to what I just mentioned with right first time. As we're executing a batch, we're in real time able to verify values as they're being entered and flag them whether they're right or not. So at the end of the batch, we already know whether exceptions have happened or not, and we only need to look at deviations in the process. We don't need to look at anything that was correct. So in the ideal case where there haven't been any deviations when you're producing a batch, you can pretty much release that product to the patient, thus cutting down the time.
Got it. What do you and you mentioned paperless a couple of times, or moving away from something needing to be handwritten. How far, would you say that an MES system drastically reduces the need for paper, and have you got an idea of how much by?
Yeah, I mean, ideally by 100% on the shop floor, right? I mean, sometimes, there could still be, some paper, right, from, maybe some legacy piece of equipment that prints something out, or you need to scan something in. But I mean, we see really we can eliminate most of that stuff, right? And I mean, that's also, one, it's good for the environment, but it's really, even that paper management, managing all that paper, there's a lot of work required, right? We need to store that for 10 plus years, make sure that that's all good, right? So you don't these days, right, you don't want paper. But if you have this paper process, that data isn't available, right? It's on a sheet of paper. And what we've seen also with COVID over the last year, with people working remotely, like, you want everything to be digital, right? You want that data instantly to be in your system, in the cloud, so it can be accessed by anybody in the company to do their job.
What makes what Körber do quite unique in this marketplace?
Yeah, sure. So what's unique about us is really our focus, right? So Körber, and also our company Werum, formerly known as Werum, we have been, as part of Werum with our product PassX, focusing on MES and also on pharma and biotech since the 90s, since 1990, right? So over, almost 25 years at this point. And, with that, we have a tremendous amount, of experience, right? We have, at this point, we're 17 of the top 30 pharmaceutical and biotechs are using our software, right? And with that experience, right, so one, the product is really tailored for this sort of manufacturing, so for regulated manufacturing, for batch manufacturing, but also not just the product, also the people that we have, right? I mean, we have a tremendous amount of knowledge in our organization on how to run these projects, how to, tailor, our software to different modalities, for, our software really works, for, and vaccines, for solid dose, cell and gene packaging, right? All sorts of processes can be covered. And, along with that also comes the quality methodology, right? So like when we develop our product, we're following things like GAMP. We have, our quality group that audits our product, with customers that audit our product. And so there's a lot of knowledge, right? A lot of expertise in that organization, and not just the people. We started also over the last couple of years, what do we call it, like making a library or templates of our product. So we actually call this content packages. So, for example, if we focus on cell and gene, when we come to you with our software product, it's not just the software you're getting, we're also providing best practices. So an example of that would be like production steps. We already have pre-built production steps that you can like drop in and then modify and adapt to your process. And this comes, from our experience doing many of these projects before.
Nice. So yeah, that wealth of experience is really quite unique as well, because I think the first time I met Wirram was, I want to say 2016, and yeah, your organization exhibited at a Facilitate conference like back in 2015, and I remember at that time the team were telling me that Wirram were involved in the first cancer vaccine with Provenge, and I thought, even then I was like, had no idea, like this is like, and this was at a time when still I don't know whether that many cell and gene therapy developers were using an MES system at all. So yeah, you definitely have built and acquired a lot of knowledge and experience, even specifically within cell and gene, let alone pharma and other biotech spaces.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's the first one, like you said, was Dendron in, I think, like 2010. That was really when we started, our journey in this personalized medicine space. After that, we Novartis with Kymriah, they're using PASX to manufacture, and then that led us to Kite, and we were pretty proud to say that we had those early companies, right? Really the ones that were the trailblazers in our field were using our software. And at this point, we've really like see this cell therapy space as a strategic market for us. We see a lot of growth there, and we have over 15 leading cell and gene companies using our software at the moment here.
The trailblazers have been using some form of paperless system in order to manage their manufacturing workflows. So MES is, in terms of that workflow, MES is a key part of what people term as Pharma 4.0 or Industry 4.0. Like, can you talk a little bit about what the different components are of that environment, and where does MES sit within it?
Yeah, so Pharma 4.0 is a coin term by ISPE, so International Society of Pharmaceutical Engineers. And it's kind of like a spin on Industry 4.0. So Pharma 4.0 provides a framework for adapting, digital strategies to the unique context of pharma and biotech manufacturing. So what this means kind of in practical terms, it means having more connectivity, so connecting all your different systems and devices together, and as a result, improving productivity, simplifying compliance, and basically, as you're capturing production information, you're able to respond to problems as they emerge. So not at the end when the batch is completed, but really, in real time, you can solve issues as they happen. And the way, if you think about it, like that's almost like the definition of what an MES system does, right? If you look at, on a modern, like if you look at kind of like that vision, what a modern facility looks like, and if we just talk about maybe a vein-to-vein process, right? Before a patient comes to the hospital to take their cells, right? So they do the apheresis, a technician or a hospital worker, they can go into a system that for scheduling, that patient, and that scheduling system would connect to the manufacturer, to that manufacturing site, where we look at, okay, what are the available manufacturing slots, right? So you can use the scheduling solution locally at the site, and that will provide back to the hospital when the patient comes in. Once that patient is scheduled, we lock up those dates in the MES, right? And the patient then comes in, we take their cells, we ship them, to the facility, and you can have, as part of this Pharma 4.0, there's other kind of, we call them supply chain orchestration solutions that can then track the cells along the supply chain, where they are, all that sort of stuff. And once they arrive at the facility, you can then they're kind of handed over to the MES system, and that's where we kind of take over. And we do that by integrating to that supply chain system, right? And then the technician on the shop floor, they're presented with their process, and along the process they'll start using maybe some bioreactors, some lab equipment, and that is then connected to the MES, right? So the operator doesn't have to read the value of the balance or of a pH meter, right? It really gets sent directly to our system. It gets captured there. So in the end, that saves a lot of data entry, right? The system performs the error, error checking, and it allows the operator to really focus on their process, right? They don't have to worry about being compliant, right? Like if you're on a traditional legacy process on a paper, or if using spreadsheets, operators, they're like worrying, okay, am I writing the date, initialing it correctly, or maybe sometimes they forget to do something, right? And that takes a lot of time, right? It creates errors. And by using kind of this modern, holistic approach, by having all these different systems work together, by having connectivity, you're, increasing, the productivity, the compliance, and this all goes into that Pharma 4.0 kind of framework that we're talking about here.
I see. And in terms of, so in our community, we've got a core part of our audience work right in manufacturing. Your chief manufacturing officer, your manufacturing associates, and the quality people and so forth. Like a lot of what you're saying here, I think they'll really get it and it'll resonate with them. But we also work with chief executives and those in sort of business strategic roles as well. And sometimes what they talk to us about is really, how can they develop competitive advantage through some tools like this, and data, and the terms like big data for someone that's at the top of a cell and gene therapy company could be an afterthought. Not for all, but for some it could be an afterthought. How can you is it a source of competitive advantage that they should be addressing with investors and so forth as well?
Yeah, so I think, what we've seen, in the space is even before the decision whether you go with MES, companies need to make the decision, okay, am I going to manufacture in-house, or are we going to use a CMO or CDMO, right? And sometimes it's also a hybrid, right? We have customers that do a mix of that. But once you decide to take manufacturing in-house, you do have to make the decision, okay, at what point are we going to go digital, right? And what order of systems are we going to go in, right? We see more and more companies are starting to adopt digital systems, or starting from digital right from the beginning. And the reason for that is really time to market, right? A lot of these therapies are getting fast track approval. And if you start with that digital, kind of footprint from the beginning, you're setting yourself up for success, right? Because you will be able to scale much quicker, than if you were to go with a manual paper-based process, which essentially allows you, a CEO that's looking also at it from a business perspective, allows you to produce more and get more, treatments to your patients at a faster rate than the competition, right? So that's definitely, we see that quite a lot, that companies already, before they're even starting their pivotal studies, that they're already looking at things like MES. And one thing that's quite interesting actually is, we have a couple of customers that are even implementing an MES before they're implementing an ERP system, which I think is really interesting, because traditionally, if you look at big pharma or, others in, subsectors of our industry, an ERP system was kind of always the first, was always before an MES system. But that's really, at this point, we see that kind of being flipped, because, that ability to scale is so important, especially if you're looking at the vein-to-vein process. Maybe just another example. So when we were, working with Kite at Yescarta, they actually, like, having this digital solution was a requirement to them becoming, to their product being approved for commercial. So I think also regulators are looking at it more and more, that you have those type of systems before you go commercial.
That's so interesting. Yeah, some research we did recently. We had some companies tell us, "Yep, you know what, this does sound really, really interesting, but I'm going to need a chief data officer or a CIO to manage my data stack." And it's interesting you say there's companies that are even considering implementing an MES system before an ERP system. And yeah, what's the can you talk about the people infrastructure? Like what kind of people do you need to support a system like this?
Yeah, so I mean, it's changing, right? I mean, traditionally, like these type of solutions would be hosted on premise, which kind of also heightens the barrier, because you do require more IT people. Today, MES, a lot of the systems are in the cloud, right? Which instantly makes it much easier because you don't need to purchase any infrastructure, you don't need, as much IT footprint to manage that. So if we look at it from a software as a service perspective, the people you need to manage it, right? Obviously, you need some. It's a tool that's being used by operations, right? So you need subject matter experts that really understand the process, so that they can map the process that's happening on the shop floor into the software.
Mm-hmm.
Quality is a big component, right? So you need to make sure whatever we're doing here is also complies with your quality team. There's definitely going to be some IT involved as well, because usually we'll be connecting either to some shop floor equipment or some an ERP system, right?
Yeah.
So that's in as well. So that's kind of goes in the upfront work to set that solution up, right? And yeah, like you said, sometimes there's also some barriers there, because it's not like you just hit a switch and the system is on, right? It is a process, right? It takes time, and you want to make sure you're doing it right? So you want to make sure you have resources that put also their time to it. But if you do that work up front to set it up properly, you're going to be rewarded, towards the end when you are able to be fully digital in your production.
Can you talk about what some of the barriers are and issues are with adoption?
Yeah, sure. I mean, resources obviously was one I just mentioned. I think another barrier obviously would be the cost. It is an investment, but the ROI, is pretty quick usually. You can recapture that in 1 to 2 years, but it really, that's when you implement these solutions, especially in pharmaceutical environment, there's also a lot of validation required. That's cost that you have to pay. We've been able, with going to our cloud model, the SaaS, right? It's actually quite good for some of the earlier stage kind of startups, because it's less of the upfront investment is less, right? Because it's SaaS, it's more of a subscription, so it mitigates that a little bit, but it's definitely something that needs to be considered. The other barrier, is just, it's change management, right? You want to make sure that people on the shop floor, also adopt it and actually use it, right? So you need to have, kind of a plan in place on how you enable people to use the software, and you can do that for training and change management and all that, and then you'll be successful.
And you mentioned sort of earlier stage companies there. Like, between early and late stage companies, is there kind of like a different driving force? Because we've seen throughout automation special interest group, the Bluebirds, the Kites, the Novartis, etc. You can hear their sense of urgency when they talk about implementing an MES system, or when they thinking deeply about Pharma 4.0, and but not so much with early stage companies. What you mentioned startups there. What's the kind of like driving force behind startups versus later stage companies?
Yeah, sure. So if the earlier you are, the more in the process, right, the less restrictions you have and the more flexible you are, right? And your process is still changing, right? So for them, what's more important is actually getting the data out and analyzing it, and then improving their process and improving their product, right, or the treatment. That's really the goal of when you're like early phases of drug development. As you go from that to phase 2, phase 3, and then commercial, that more and more restricted your process is going to get, right? And the less flexible, the MES will be, and it's going to be more about quality, compliance, and that sort of stuff, right? So you'll go less from focusing on the data and more focusing on compliance and making sure that whatever you're doing, what's being sent to the patient, it will be it will be good and help them, right? So yeah, I mean that's really it, right? So when you're looking for your IT solutions in that early stage, you want to make sure whatever you're picking is flexible enough to adapt to your process, right? So many kind of traditional MES systems, they've been designed for commercial manufacturing where it is restrictive, and as a result, what we've heard is some of these solutions, it becomes difficult to adjust to the process. So you want to make sure you pick something that also meets your phase one or pivotal what your demands are in those phases, that the software also matches that.
And the early stage companies that think like that that kind of want to be, you mentioned digital first, like companies that are like, we're going to be a digital first biotech, and they want to build that digital foundation from the ground up. I suppose my first question is, are they quite rare? And then my second is like, what do they need for that digital foundation?
Yeah, I would say they're not, well, the companies that are going digital first, they're the ones that aren't rare. I think it's rare to just go with paper these days. I mean, it wouldn't make sense, right? I feel like the companies that don't embrace a digital first approach are the ones that are going to get left behind. And it's really, I don't even think it's a linear scale. It's like an exponential, growth curve, right? Where, as you go digital, it's just going to accelerate more and more. And yeah, I mean, so like we talked about before, right? The speed to market, the right first time, the access to the data, like just having all of that, I mean, is just going to improve